would you say is the main difference between TWI job relations training and other supervisory training courses you've encountered?
Yeah, so what I would say the biggest aspect of TWI job relations that sets it aside from other supervisory training is the focus on preventive medicine. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is TWI job relations is all about equipping supervisors, equipping leaders and managers with the tools that are necessary so that the people who are actually on the front lines, the supervisors and leads who are on the front lines, who are closest to the employees, can actually use foundations of good leadership to develop strong job relations and prevent problems from arising or from becoming so big that they're tough to manage. In my experience, other supervisory training courses focus more on being reactive. TWI job relations is all about getting out ahead of things and forming a strong enough relationship with your employees so that you're not always being reactive. You're acting preventively.
I've heard that the course focuses on cultivation of strong, quote unquote, job relations between a supervisor and his or her employee. Can you explain a bit about what that entailed? Maybe give some examples.
Yeah, sure. So, in my experience, everything about my effectiveness as a supervisor, my effectiveness as a manager was always about my relationship with my employees and how strong that relationship was. And for that matter, my relationship with my coworkers, my peers, my managers. Your relationship, or what we refer to in this course as job relations, has everything to do with your ability to actually be a leader and be an effective manager and supervisor of people. So when, we hear the word relations, we often think about relationship. Well, that is every bit as important in your job as it is in your personal life, right? In fact, I had a mentor tell me many years ago that as I grew as a supervisor, I should know one particular thing about every employee with whom I work, and occasionally make it a priority to actually ask that person, hey, how are things going with your dog? How are things going with your family? One thing that has absolutely nothing to do with that person's professional life, but makes that person realize that you actually know him or her as an individual. And, this course talks in great detail about the effect of the individual upon who it is that we bring to work every single day. Think about it, Dean. I don't know about yourself, but in addition to work, what other things do you think actually make you or me an individual? What other things are in our minds that actually make us an individual?
Gotcha.
I mean, I'll tell you right now, one of them is certainly my background, my family, my 2-year-old, my love for the great outdoors and for antique cars. Well, hey, I tell you what, if something is going on with my 2-year-old and I come to work, I can't necessarily purge my mind of that. And I, as a supervisor, need to know that about my employees. So TWI job relations talks a lot about how does my relationship, my job relations with my employees affect my ability to lead. And those job relations have everything to do with my effectiveness.
What are the foundations of good job relations, Frank? Are they legal guidelines?
No, actually, the foundations that we talk about are actually very, very basic principles. For instance, one of them that we discussed, there are actually 4 of them. I'm not going to get into great detail here, but one of them is let each employee know how he or she is doing. You come home at the end of the day and your spouse asks you, hey, how was your work day? And you say, geez, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I did today. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you think that you'd actually like to know how you're doing? So there's an example of a foundation. Make sure you're close enough with your people so that you're actually on a regular basis giving them feedback, giving them input as to what they're doing great and what they could actually improve on. Another perfect example of a foundation is give credit when due. And in fact, a little subheading under that is give that feedback while it's hot. So look for those little things that people are doing that go above and beyond, and take the time to actually give credit for that. Hey, I really appreciate the fact that you've got the sniffles today, but you actually came into work and you put in an extra couple of hours. Boy, I appreciate that, Dean. Thanks for doing that. Makes a huge difference. It may not be an extra line item on your paycheck, but boy, if you hear your supervisor give that credit once in a while, it goes a long way.
My understanding is that the TWI method for solving job relations problems has its basis in the Deming cycle. Can you explain what that means to a supervisor?
Yeah, sure. So we're getting a little technical here, but for anybody who's associated with the Deming cycle, that's also known as Plan, Do, Check, Act, for instance. So the Deming cycle is all about understanding in a repeat loop. How do I plan as I approach a problem-solving situation? Where do I actually take action? How do I check on my results? And then how do I essentially wrap a bow around what I just did and standardize and change things, change my operating instructions afterward to check my results? Well, the TWI method is based on the idea of, in job relations, of getting the facts, weighing and deciding, taking action, and then checking results. That's the 4-step method that we teach in great detail in TWI job relations. Well, think about all the effort that's required in getting the facts when you encounter an issue in human relations. Very, very similar to the plan portion of the Deming cycle. I have to actually consider what are facts associated with the record, what are facts associated with, and this may sound counterintuitive, but what are facts associated with opinions and feelings? That, by the way, those facts associated with opinions and feelings are concentrated upon very heavily in this course, because it's counterintuitive to think that facts and opinions and feelings actually are related, right? Right. Well, let's face it, if I have an employee and he or she has opinions and feelings, to that employee, those are facts. My job relations with that employee better be strong enough so that I can actually understand that. Just going on with the Deming cycle conversation. So then I weigh and decide. Well, that's the do phase in the Deming cycle. That's where I'm actually trying to consider, what would the potential effect of my possible actions be upon the individual, upon my objective as a supervisor, upon the department as a whole, and then would it necessarily be effective? Am I allowed to do this, for instance, from a policies and procedures perspective? Next phase in the Deming cycle is going to be act, right? Next phase in the Deming cycle is going to be check. Well, next phase in the TWI method is going to be to actually take action. Well, I take action and I move immediately into my 4th phase, which is check results. In the Deming cycle, that's my act phase. That's where I'm actually monitoring and I'm actually seeing whether or not things are having the effect that I expect them to, and actually trying to, in the Deming cycle, I'm actually trying to standardize. I'm trying to update my procedures. I'm trying to make sure I train everybody. So again, I don't want to tie these two too tightly together, but I think a lot of the credibility of the TWI method is based on the fact that it's actually tied to the Deming cycle, and that it has that long-term record of effectiveness.
Can you describe to me the potential candidates for this program, what they can expect from attending it, and the process by which the training and mentoring provide career opportunities?
Yeah, sure. So
career development opportunities, I should say, really.
Yeah, so the potential candidates for this program range from experienced managers, even executives. In fact, I've taught this course to people who have had many, many years of leadership experience, all the way down to folks who you're considering in your business for potential future leadership opportunity. Individual contributors who could potentially be supervisors or lead persons in the near future. The benefits that I've seen have been absolutely astounding. I've been lucky enough to teach this course to groups of managers with an awful lot of experience, but getting those managers from all different functions within an organization into a room for 5 straight sessions of 2.5 hours each, and getting them all aligned around the foundations for good leadership, around a common problem-solving method, actually created a more cohesive team. But the other situations I've seen have been when I've got a brand new supervisor who's having a really hard time retaining employees, because every situation that arises, he or she is actually back on her heels or back on his heels and being reactive. And this course actually helped, I'm thinking of one in particular, helped that new supervisor realize that, wow, if I develop a good relationship with my people, maybe I'm not always having to take on that boss role. Maybe I can actually be more of a transformational leader rather than a transactional leader. So yeah, the range of people who are appropriate for the course goes all the way from potential future leaders to people who have actually been managers and executives for many years.
A little bit more about the mentoring part of this course, Frank.
Yeah, so this is an important aspect of the course. So TWI job relations, as with the other TWI disciplines, is a certification course. In fact, when you complete the course, and after you complete your mentoring, which I'll talk about in a quick moment, you receive what's called a certificate of completion, 10-hour certificate in TWI job relations. Well, after the classroom time itself is complete, each student actually gets a chance to spend some one-on-one time with the instructor. And what I ask of each student is, during the month or two between when the class ends and when mentoring picks up, identify one or two situations, because they're guaranteed to arise, where you end up having to actually utilize the 4 foundations of job relations, or ideally where you actually find yourself having to use the TWI-JR 4-step problem solving method. And we dive into that. We dive into it in quite a bit of detail, and not only analyze how those foundations were used, or how that problem solving method was used, but also we work with the supervisor to be a little bit introspective and think about, what could I have done differently? How could I have better utilized these foundations so that I could actually have taken better preventive action? So the mentoring phase is very, very powerful, because it actually gives the student an opportunity to work with the instructor one-on-one, which is pretty important. I mean, so let's face it, every human relation or job relation situation that arises has to be handled kind of delicately and discreetly. So that one-on-one time is often very good from a developmental perspective for the student.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Well, thanks, Frank, for providing such a thorough overview of the TWI job relations training course provided by Constep. Thanks for your time.
All right, thanks, Dean.